The grand marble corridors of the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., fell silent as First Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Gustavo Gelpí approached the podium. The judicial conference room was packed with legal luminaries from across the nation. Judges, constitutional scholars, and practicing attorneys who'd gathered for the annual Federal Judiciary Conference. In my 30 years on the bench, Judge Gelpí opened his voice carrying the weight of his distinguished career. I have rarely encountered a legislator who grasps the constitutional implications of their work with such profound clarity. The audience leaned forward in anticipation, as their respected Puerto Rican-born judge, known for his measured words and careful assessments, paused for a moment. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett represents what our democracy desperately needs. A brilliant legal mind who respects the constitutional framework while fighting tirelessly for justice. She is without question the rising star of this congressional class. The room erupted in applause. Camera flashes illuminated Crockett's face as she sat in stunned silence, clearly not expecting this level of recognition from one of the nation's most respected federal judges. As a freshman congresswoman who had faced significant criticism and even threats for her outspoken stances, this moment of validation from across the political spectrum marked a turning point that would reshape her position in American politics forever. Before we dive deeper into this remarkable story of how a freshman congresswoman earned the respect of America's judicial elite, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you the inspiring success stories that the mainstream media often overlooks. Hit that notification bell to stay updated. Remarkable American leaders making a difference. To understand the significance of Judge Gelpí's endorsement, one must first understand the parallel journeys that brought these two legal minds to that pivotal moment in Washington. Judge Gustavo Gelpí's path to the federal bench was paved with academic excellence and principled jurisprudence. Born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Gelpí graduated with honors from Brandeis University before earning his law degree from Suffolk University Law School. His career included service as a federal prosecutor, Solicitor General of Puerto Rico, and magistrate judge before President George W. Bush appointed him as a federal district judge in 2006. In 2021, he was elevated to the First Circuit Court of Appeals by President Biden, making him only the second Puerto Rican to serve on that prestigious court. Known for his meticulous legal analysis and even-handed approach to constitutional questions, Gelpí had earned respect across political lines. His judicial philosophy emphasized strict adherence to constitutional principles while recognizing the law's role in protecting the vulnerable. Absence that had made him a respected figure among both conservatives and liberals in the legal community. Judge Gelpí doesn't speak in superlatives, explained Howard Michaels, former clerk to the judge and current professor at Georgetown Law. When he recognizes someone's legal acumen, it carries tremendous weight because his assessments are consistently measured and thoughtful. Jasmine Crockett's journey to Congress followed a different, but equally impressive trajectory. Raised in St. Louis by a postal worker father and teacher mother, Crockett's early exposure to community struggles inspired her pursuit of justice. After earning her law degree from the University of Houston Law Center, she built a reputation as a formidable civil rights attorney in Texas, often taking on challenging cases defending protesters and challenging systemic inequities. Her legal work frequently placed her at odds with powerful institutions, but her thorough preparation and constitutional arguments earned grudging respect even from her opponents. She comes prepared with precedent and statute. One Texas prosecutor had noted after losing a high-profile case to Crockett, "You cannot outwork her or catch her unprepared on the law." When Crockett decided to run for the Texas legislature in 2020, she faced significant headwinds. Political observers dismissed her chances, but her direct communication style and deep understanding of her community's needs resonated with voters. During her brief but impactful tenure in the Texas House, she became known for her detailed questioning during hearings and her ability to identify constitutional flaws in proposed legislation. Her subsequent election to Congress in 2022 came with both opportunity and scrutiny. As a freshman representative, Crockett could have easily faded into the background of Washington politics. Instead, she brought the same meticulous preparation and constitutional focus that had defined her legal career to her committee assignments. What few people knew was that Judge Gelpí had been quietly observing Crockett's work from afar. As a member of the Judicial Conference's Congressional Relations Committee, He had reviewed transcripts of her questioning during congressional hearings on judicial matters. Her approach to complex constitutional questions had caught his attention. Her questions don't focus on political talking points, Judge Gelpí had told a colleague months before his public endorsement. She identifies the core constitutional principles at stake. That's unfortunately rare in today's Congress. What do you consider makes someone truly earn respect across political lines in today's divided America? Have you seen other examples of professionals gaining recognition from unexpected quarters? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're highlighting the most insightful perspectives in an upcoming video about bridge builders in American politics. The path to Judge Gelpí's unprecedented public endorsement was not without significant challenges. For Crockett, the months leading up to the judicial conference had been a baptism by fire. 3 months earlier, during a contentious House Judiciary Committee hearing examining proposed reforms to the federal courts, Crockett had found herself at the center of a political firestorm. The hearing room was packed as witnesses presented sharply divided testimony on judicial independence. Congresswoman Crockett, the committee chair, announced, "You have 5 minutes for questioning." All eyes turned to the freshman, representative as she addressed Federal Judge William Martinez, who had testified about political pressures on the judiciary. "Judge Martinez," Crockett began, her voice steady and clear, "Article 3 of the Constitution establishes the independence of the federal judiciary, but that independence faces practical challenges. Could you elaborate on how congressional funding decisions impact judicial independence beyond the obvious salary considerations?" Her question immediately set a different tone from the partisan attacks that had dominated the hearing. Rather than seek a gotcha moment, she was probing the structural relationship between the branches of government. Judge Martinez leaned toward his microphone. "That's an excellent question that gets to the heart of the matter. When courts lack adequate resources for staff, technology, or even basic security, it compromises our ability to administer justice efficiently and effectively." For the next 5 minutes, Crockett led a masterclass in constitutional inquiry, exploring the nuanced interplay between congressional power of the purse and judicial independence. She cited specific precedents and historical examples that demonstrated her deep understanding of separation of powers principles. When a senior committee member interrupted to accuse her of grandstanding, Crockett responded with measured precision. "With respect, Congressman," she remarked, maintaining her composure, "these aren't partisan questions. The structural integrity of our constitutional system depends on all 3 branches functioning properly, Judge. Martinez's insights assist us understand our constitutional responsibility to fund the judiciary adequately while respecting its independence." What Crockett didn't know was that Judge Gelpí was watching the hearing from his chambers. He had been asked by the Judicial Conference to monitor congressional engagement with the judiciary and had been particularly interested in this hearing. The real test came 2 weeks later when Crockett found herself in a heated exchange with Attorney General Richard Collins during an oversight hearing. Collins, known for his combative style and ability to avoid answering direct questions from legislators, had stonewalled several committee members. When Crockett's turn came, the atmosphere in the room was tense. Attorney General Collins began, "I want to focus specifically on the department's implementation of the Supreme Court's ruling in Thompson versus Department of Justice regarding FOIA exemptions." Collins settled in, clearly expecting another political exchange he could easily deflect. "The court's ruling clearly established a 3-part test for withholding documents under executive privilege," Crockett continued. "Yet the department's guidance memo of March 14th appears to ignore the 3rd prong entirely. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Collins paused, visibly surprised by the specific nature of the question. "I'm not familiar with the specific guidance memo you're referencing." Crockett calmly held up a document. "I have the memo here signed by your Deputy Attorney General. I'm happy to provide you a copy." She handed the document to a page who delivered it to Collins. "Now, if you look at page 4, paragraph 2, the guidance states that consideration of public interest is not required when asserting executive privilege. Yet the Thompson ruling explicitly states on page 27 that courts must weigh potential harm against public interest in disclosure. This seems to be direct contradiction of settled law." The room fell silent as Collins examined the document. The usual partisan bickering had been replaced by a substantive legal discussion that revealed Crockett's deep preparation. "I would require to review this with our legal team," Collins finally admitted. "If there's an inconsistency with the court's ruling, We would certainly want to correct that. I appreciate that commitment, Crockett responded. The integrity of our system depends on all branches respecting Supreme Court President. I'll follow up in writing next week. The exchange made headlines not for political fireworks, but for its substance. Freshman Representative corners Attorney General on legal detail. Read one headline. Crockett's preparation pays off in oversight hearing. Read another behind-the-scenes judge. Gelp had taken notice again. He mentioned the exchange to several colleagues on the bench, noting how refreshing it was to see a member of Congress engaging on substantive legal grounds rather than seeking political points. The final test came during a constitutional crisis that few saw coming, when a controversial executive order raised serious separation of powers questions. Congressional response largely fell along partisan lines. Democrats condemned it while Republicans defended it, with few engaging with the actual constitutional principles at stake. Crockett broke from this pattern. In a flaw speech that would later be cited in legal journals, she methodically analyzed the constitutional issues, citing not only precedents that supported her position, but also acknowledging those that complicated it. Our constitutional analysis cannot be outcome-driven, she stated to a surprisingly attentive House chamber. Whether we like the policy outcome or not, we must respect the constitutional guardrails that protect our system of government. Her speech drew attention from constitutional scholars across the political spectrum. Conservative legal expert Jonathan Adler tweeted, "Disagree with Representative Crockett on policy, but her constitutional analysis today was principled and thorough. It was his consistent pattern of substantive engagement with constitutional principles that had led Judge Gelpí to make his unprecedented public endorsement at the Federal Judiciary Conference. Judge Gelpí's recognition of Congresswoman Crockett as a rising star at the Federal Judiciary Conference marked a decisive turning point in her career trajectory. The moment carried particular weight because it came from a judge appointed by a Republican president and elevated by a Democratic one, a rare figure who had maintained credibility across the political divide." As Gelpí concluded his remarks, he extended an invitation that stunned the room. "Congresswoman Crockett, the Judicial Conference Committee on Federal Legislative Relations has an opening for a congressional liaison. While we cannot formally nominate you, I want to publicly express that numerous on the federal bench would welcome your participation in this critical dialogue between our branches." The significance of this invitation was immediately apparent to everyone in the room. Never before had a freshman representative been publicly endorsed for such apposition by a sitting federal judge of Gelpí's stature. As the formal session ended, a remarkable scene unfolded. Judges appointed by presidents from both parties approached Crockett to express their appreciation for her approach to constitutional questions. Chief Judge Merrick Hamilton of the Fourth Circuit, a noted conservative jurist, was overhead telling her, "Your questioning during the judicial independence hearing showed a respect for our branch that transcends partisanship. We require more of that." Judge Elena Vasquez, considered a leading liberal voice on the Ninth Circuit, similarly noted, "You've demonstrated that one can be a passionate advocate for justice while still respecting constitutional boundaries. That balance is essential." Reporters present at the conference immediately recognized the significance of what they were witnessing. "Congresswoman, what does Judge Gelpí's endorsement mean to you?" one referred to out as cameras flashed. Crockett, typically quick with responses, took a moment to compose herself. "As an attorney who has practiced in federal courts, I have immense respect for the judiciary. Judge Gelpí's words are humbling. They remind me that our system works best when all branches engage with each other, based on constitutional principles rather than political expediency." The following morning, legal publications and mainstream media alike carried the story. The Wall Street Journal's legal affairs page headlined, "Federal Judge Identifies Congressional Rising Star in Rare Public Endorsement." Hughes' blog noted, "Judge Gelpí's recognition of Representative Crockett signals judicial appreciation for constitutional expertise in Congress." Perhaps most significantly, the American Bar Association announced that Crockett would receive its Congressional Distinguished Service Award, an honor typically reserved for senior legislators with decades of service. The citation noted her exceptional commitment to constitutional principles and the rule of law during her freshman term. For Crockett, who had faced significant criticism and even threats for her outspoken advocacy, this recognition brought a different kind of validation. one based not on political alignment, but on professional respect for her legal acumen and constitutional understanding. Back in her district, the impact was immediately felt. Local bar associations requested speaking engagements. Law schools invited her to lecture on separation of powers. Even political opponents moderated their rhetoric, with one stating on local radio, "We disagree on policy, but when federal judges from across the spectrum recognize your constitutional expertise, that deserves respect." In Washington, the practical effects of this new status quickly became apparent. Senior members of both parties opened consulting her on legislation with constitutional implications. The Speaker appointed her to a select committee examining judicial reform. Despite her junior status, the White House counsel's office reached out to discuss legislative approaches to executive privilege questions. In a private moment captured by a congressional photographer, but not released until months later, Crockett was seen sitting alone in her office, after the wave of recognition, holding Judge Gelpí's written remarks that had been delivered to her office. The photographer later described seeing tears in her eyes, a rare, vulnerable moment for the typically composed Congresswoman. When asked regarding this moment months later, Crockett would acknowledge its impact. "There are times when you question whether staying focused on principles rather than politics is worth it." Judge Gelpí's recognition wasn't just personally validating. It was a reminder that our system still has room for substantive, principled engagement across branches and party lines. In the year following Judge Gelpí's public recognition of Congresswoman Crockett, the impact on both her career and broader congressional judicial relations proved more significant than anyone could have anticipated. 3 months after the Federal Judiciary Conference, Crockett was formally appointed to the Judicial Conference's Congressional Liaison Committee, the first freshman representative ever to hold this position. In this role, she helped bridge communication between Congress and the federal judiciary on matters ranging from court funding to judicial security. Representative Crockett has transformed how this committee functions. Judge Raymond Chen of the Federal Circuit noted in an interview with Legal Times, she brings both practical litigation experience and legislative insight that helps us communicate our institutional needs more effectively to Congress. The impact extended beyond committee assignments. When a controversial Supreme Court decision sparked calls from some progressives to court pack or impose term limits, Crockett took a nuanced position that surprised many. In an op-ed for the Washington Post titled "Respecting the Constitution While Seeking Reform," she outlined a thoughtful approach to judicial reform that acknowledged valid concerns while respecting constitutional boundaries. "While I understand the frustration with certain decisions," she wrote, "our response must strengthen rather than undermine constitutional principles. Reform should enhance judicial independence and legitimacy, not diminish them." The piece drew praise from unexpected quarters. Retired Justice Stephen Breyer cited it in a lecture at Harvard Law School, exemplifying the thoughtful approach to inter-branch relations that our system requires. Conservative legal scholar Randy Barnett tweeted, "Don't agree with all of Representative Crockett's proposed reforms, but her approach shows deep respect for constitutional structure." Within Congress, Crockett's elevated stature led to a notable shift in how she was received by colleagues. Senior members from both parties began seeking her input on legislation with constitutional implications. During a particularly contentious debate over executive privilege, the Speaker called on her to explain the relevant constitutional principles to the full caucus. "What we're witnessing," observed Dr. Caroline Montgomery of the Brennan Center for Justice, "is the emergence of a legislative constitutionalist, someone who takes seriously Congress's role as ACO equal branch with responsibility for constitutional interpretation." Representative Crockett is reviving a tradition that has been diminished in recent decades as Congress has ceded constitutional analysis to the courts. Perhaps most significantly, Crockett's approach opened influencing other members of Congress, particularly junior representatives, still defining their legislative identities. A minor but growing group of representatives from both parties opened emulating her substantive, preparation-heavy approach to hearings and constitutional questions. "I watched how she handled the Attorney General in that hearing," one freshman Republican representative told Roll Call. "She wasn't playing for cameras or sound bites. She was substantively engaging with legal principles. That's the member you want to be, regardless of our policy differences." Law schools took notice as well. Georgetown Law created a new course titled Legislative Constitutionalism in Practice, featuring Crockett's committee work as a primary case study. Harvard Law invited her to co-a reading group on separation of powers during its January term. Their relationship with Judge Gelpí evolved into a productive professional friendship. They co-authored an article for the Yale Law Journal on interbranch dialogue, arguing that both Congress and the judiciary benefit from substantive engagement on constitutional principles. Their article became required reading in several law school courses on separation of powers. 1 year after his initial recognition, Judge Gelpí reflected on its impact during the following year's Federal Judiciary Conference. When I described Representative Crockett as a rising star last year, I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove. He told the assembled judges and legal scholars, "She has demonstrated that one can be both a passionate advocate for justice and a careful steward of constitutional principles, a balance our system desperately needs." For Crockett herself, the journey brought both professional respect and personal growth. In a rare personal interview with a hometown newspaper, she reflected on the unexpected trajectory of her career. "I didn't come to Congress seeking validation from the judiciary or anyone else," she remarked. "I came to fight for my constituents and the principles I believe in. What I've learned is that doing that work with integrity and thorough preparation creates opportunities for impact that transcend traditional political boundaries." When asked what lesson others might undertake from her experience, Crockett's answer was characteristically thoughtful. "America's institutions function best when we engage with them as they were designed, as interlocking systems that require both separation and communication. The judiciary isn't the enemy of Congress, nor is Congress the enemy of the executive. We're all stewards of a constitutional system that requires good faith engagement across differences." As her first term in Congress neared its conclusion, political analysts across the spectrum opened speculating about Crockett's future. Some suggested a leadership track within Congress, others a potential future judicial nomination. What remained clear was that the pathway opened by Judge Gelpí's recognition had created possibilities that few freshman representatives ever experience. "Whatever path Representative Crockett chooses," wrote respected legal commentator Dahlia Lithwick, "she has already made a significant contribution by demonstrating that constitutional expertise and principled engagements still command respect across our divided government. In an era of performative politics, she has shown the enduring power of substance." The story of Jasmine Crockett's rise to national respect reminds us that in American politics, authentic expertise and principled engagement can still transcend partisan boundaries. Judge Gelpí's recognition didn't create her abilities. It simply illuminated what was already there, allowing her light to shine more brightly on the national stage. If you've made it to the end of this remarkable story regarding how genuine expertise and principled leadership can still earn respect across political lines, be certain to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We're dedicated to bringing you stories about American leaders who are making a difference beyond partisan politics. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming profile on other bridge builders working to strengthen our democratic institutions. Share this video with someone who might be inspired by Congresswoman Crockett's journey, from civil rights attorney to nationally respected legislator.